Hello, welcome to the ironic conclusion of my How to Get into Film School series. In this video, we'll be talking about why I dropped out of film school. So this video is definitely ironic considering the last two I made, but I wanted to make it because I'm currently in graduate school at George Washington University studying for my master's in international affairs. And after talking to my friends in film school and reflecting on, why I transferred after my second year in film school. Even after my first video, I said something like, I really, really want to be a screenwriter. Turns out I do not really, really want to be a screenwriter. So I wanted to make a video drawing that series to a close and talk about why exactly I decided to leave film school to study political science. It starts with a pandemic. Um, I ended up moving to Hong Kong because spring break at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts never ended. And Hong Kong is where my parents were stationed because my dad is a pilot. So I moved to Hong Kong. I completed my last semester at UNCSA virtually. And then I transferred in May of that year to the University of Central Florida. It was definitely a weird time because literally 2 weeks before I transferred, I had gotten accepted into the screenwriting program at UNCSA. And UNCSA had been my dream school. Like, it was my number one choice. It was where I wanted to go above all else. And when I got in, it was amazing. My first 2 years were really great there, but gradually I just started to feel more and more like something was off. And I eventually accepted that I just needed to leave. So, making this video ultimately as some helpful advice to, especially about self-reflection while you're in university, so you'll know earlier than I did if you're actually in the right place. Go through some reasons about what made me realize that I wasn't in the right place, and then I'll give like some general advice that I've learned, although maybe you shouldn't be taking advice from me. Because the first reason is that at UNCSA I was surrounded by super talented people. My friends were all animators, they were editors, they were directors, they were writers, all really awesome, really talented, really creative people. And it's easy to compare yourself in that sense, but it wasn't in the sense that like I felt like I was less talented or more talented than the other people I was with. It was more like when we talked about why we wanted to do film. The people I knew would always say, oh, I always wanted to do film, or I knew I wanted to be a film director when I was 5 years old. And I just didn't have that. I didn't get into film until I was in like my, how long are you in high school? Until I was like in 11th grade. And I'm not saying you can't have passion for anything until later than life, you definitely can. But for me, there was like definitely a gap in where their passion was and where my passion was, because my interest in film wasn't necessarily in the film itself. I was more interested in what film could do for me and how it would make people see me and how people would regard my art and my work. So film was basically a tool just to get me to where I wanted to be. Honestly, I could feel within myself that I just wasn't as focused as everyone else. I still really enjoyed writing and telling stories, but I also wanted to travel. I wanted to meet people outside of just the context of recruiting them for a film or interviewing them for a documentary. I wanted to make decisions. I wanted to learn more about the world and be involved in it. And you can definitely do that with film, but film just wasn't the way I wanted to do it. So I tried to double major in editing and writing. I even tried to take history classes at Wake Forest down the road, and neither of those options were working for me. So I eventually realized and had to accept that all of my interests couldn't be satisfied with just film. Second reason is going to sound a little weird, but I actually liked writing stories more than telling them. So I really enjoy watching video essays of people analyzing characters and story arcs. I like going into all those details. So like I like actual novels and literature more than writing screenplays. I liked reading about the inner processes of a character's thoughts, or and I love reading books where somebody describes an emotion that I've had perfectly. You can definitely do it in film, but for me, the words just resonate more. And I just couldn't do that at UNCSA. I couldn't learn how to be a novelist or an author at UNCSA. And I felt that a lot of the writing that I was doing was the stories that I wanted to tell were either changed throughout the filmmaking process and they never reflected my original vision, but I felt I could do that more with writing my own stories and writing my own books. So that was another big reason why I decided that screenwriting just was no longer for me. The reason I left UNCSA, one of the things I wrote in my original statement of purpose was that I wanted to change the way Black people were seen in media. I wanted to make social commentary, I wanted to do magic realism and speculative fiction. I wanted to be like the next Issa Rae, Jordan Peele. So, for example, I wrote a story about a woman who coughed up red flowers every time she was around a dead body, and that was supposed to symbolize like depression or something. I turned it to a short story, and it was actually published by a publishing company called Midnight Indigo. That was really cool, and that was more related to the kind of writing I actually wanted to do, and the story wasn't changed at all once it finally went to print. I also realized I didn't want to just make allegories for racism or mental health or whatever in stories. I wanted to actually be involved with it. I wanted to actually be hands-on with the issues that I was passionate about and engage with people and become like an expert in these things so I could actually do something outside of film. The other thing was that I was 18 years old and I didn't know a lot about the world at the time. So a lot of my stories I felt were very thin. They had these really interesting concepts, but there wasn't really much substance beneath them. And I was missing that nuance that those stories needed. In real life, nothing is really black and white. Everything is somehow simpler and yet more complicated than you actually think. And that's just something I've had to realize. And I feel like now that I'm being more honest with myself and realizing that I am also somehow simpler and more complicated than I think, my stories are starting to reflect that. And the way I move about the world is also acknowledging that as well. The fourth reason I left UNCSA is just very simple. I just couldn't see myself graduating from there. When I tried to imagine it, it just didn't register in my mind. It was something like it didn't make sense in my body. Like I couldn't see myself getting a diploma that said UNCSA Bachelor's in Filmmaking. I just couldn't see it at all. I don't know if it was instinct, but I just had this feeling, like this deep feeling within me that it just wouldn't happen. And it was probably honestly one of the strongest reasons that I had serious doubts about continuing on to my third year. Fifth reason I left kind of goes back to what I was saying before. I was only telling one kind of story. Like I said before, I wanted to tell stories about social commentary with magic realism. I wanted to tell stories about the awkward Black girl because that's who I was at the time. That's why I really loved Issa Rae, because she was kind of saying what I had been saying my whole life, that not all Black people are the same, not all Black women are the same. But the truth was, I wasn't the same girl that I had been in high school. I wasn't the same audience, if that makes any sense. I wasn't the same person that needed those stories at the time. I had grown up a little bit. I was starting to realize that I wasn't just awkward. I'm also creative. I'm tired. I'm I'm self-reflective. I'm passionate. I'm ambitious. I'm stubborn, I'm self-doubting, I'm confused. This starting to sound like that video where the guy is like, I'm greedy, I'm selfish, I got PTSDs. I don't remember what that video was. But yeah, quite frankly, at 18, I didn't know enough about life to make nuanced stories. So I ended up telling the same story over and over again about, a young, awkward Black girl who had powers that somehow had something to do with a social situation that she was gave. It was all about allegory, but there was no depth to it beyond that. But now that I'm taking classes like political psychology, causes of war, democracy and governance development, in undergrad, when I went to the University of Central Florida, I even ended up taking a class on U.S. space history, on national security law. And after taking that class, I realized I did not want to be a lawyer at all. Um, but now I'm seeing all these sides to aspects of life and humanity that I just didn't realize before, and I wasn't being fed that at UNCSA. There are liberal arts courses that allowed for that, but that was more of like it was more like a side to the entree of a film, if that makes any sense. So that was just what you had on the side, and the entree, like what you were supposed to focus on, was film. But I wanted the side to be the entree. I wanted that to be everything that I would dive right into. I'm realizing now that I don't want to just write stories for awkward Black girls. I want to write stories and be engaged with people who can see themselves in an awkward Black girl. I want to write stories that anybody can see themselves in, because I recognize myself in stories that I I look nothing like the characters. I've seen myself in The Stranger. I've seen myself in Kafka on the Shore. Um, I've realized a good story can come from anywhere, and that anyone can connect with a good story. And that's exactly what I wanted. Well, it's part of what I want to do, but that was another reason why I realized I couldn't become that or do that at UNCSA. The last reason is kind of embarrassing a little bit, but I just really wanted to be known for something. I wanted to be the next Issa Rae, and our names rhymed, so I figured, it's destiny, it's bound to happen. She had made the awkward Black girl into this mainstream thing, and I wanted to add to it with my magic realism perspective. But eventually, I had to realize there was already an Issa Rae, and who was Desiree? I didn't know. Um, And I realize now that if I spent my life constantly trying to be or live up to someone else, I was always just going to be disappointed in myself. Because fame would never solve any of my insecurities. It would just cast a spotlight on them for everyone to see. Um, I'm not going to be the next Issa Rae, but I'm going to be the first Desiree Wins. And that's probably way more important for me. I had to accept what truly interested and inspired me, so I could find something that would help me get there. This doesn't mean that I know exactly what I'm doing, or that I'm perfect, or that, film school is a waste of time or anything. It just means that I had to follow what actually excited me. It's weird to say, but I was working on a TV show. And one of the things that helped me realize this was I was working on a TV show, and they were setting up this fantasy world or something. And it had a lot to do with they were trying to figure out how the way the corruption of the government would affect the plot of the story, but they didn't know how the government worked exactly. So I went out of my way in my free time to write up a constitution. I made a draft of it, and then I sent it to everyone. And I had this cute little PowerPoint presentation about how the government worked, how the parliamentarians were elected, how the president could be impeached, removed, or cast out. And I remember it was like maybe a 10-minute presentation. And I remember afterward, everyone was kind of just silent and staring at me. And I also kind of realized for me too, I was like, I actually really enjoyed making that and presenting it. And at that point, I was like, what am I doing? Why am I not, doing this? Like, I don't want to just make governments for a TV show. I want to be involved in like learning the processes of government. Right now, I'm studying democracy studies at the George Washington University. Like, I would love to be an advisor who can make recommendations to who are trying to strengthen democratic institutions, to actually have a hand in, consulting or helping somebody who wants to improve their country or their government. Like, I actually want to be physically there. I want to help, and I want to be an expert in democracy, democratization, authoritarianism. All of those things just really get me excited when I start talking about them, and I won't start talking about them here because this isn't that kind of video. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say is the things that got me more excited were the things that I just couldn't ignore anymore. And that was ultimately the main reason why the importance of me being known for something was pretty much overshadowed by my desire to just do the things that I was so excited about. Now that I talked a little bit about why I left film school, I'll talk a bit more about what I've learned from the experience. And the first thing I want to say is that having doubts is not the same thing as being in the wrong place. Everyone has doubts. If you hate what you're doing, that's pretty obvious. The trick is really to be honest with yourself, and that's hard because first you have to clear away all the, I guess I would call them non-reasons why you're doing something. Like if you're doing something to impress somebody else, or if you're doing something because you think it'll make you look good, you really do just have to do things for yourself. And I also understand that, it's hard to do that. You're in the wrong place if you're always thinking or dreaming about what it would be like to be somewhere else, which is what I was doing. I feel like if you honestly love what you're doing, if you start talking about something, you can hear yourself becoming more and more excited about it, and that's what you're actually doing now. You're definitely in the right place. But the trick is to be honest with yourself, which honestly is like probably the hardest and bravest things you can ever do. But the truth is, like, there are things that we are meant to do, but sometimes we won't accept it. We won't acknowledge it. I had been ignoring that I had always loved history, that I always loved politics because I wanted to be this prolific filmmaker. And when I was ignoring it, I was actually suffering more because I wasn't being honest with myself. And if that's always been in you, if that's always been in you to make film, to tell stories, to get behind the camera, or to edit, or to write for a film or whatever, then that's what's in you. But what's meant for you, I believe, is something you truly can't ignore. If you can't ignore it, if it keeps calling to you, then it probably means something. You should probably listen to it. If it's calling, you should probably pick up. The second thing I would say is it's okay to change your mind. Who you are now, sitting there watching this video, is not who you will be in 10 years, or 10 days, or even 10 minutes, because anything could happen. Or more likely, you'll probably find yourself changing over time. You meet people, you try new things, you pick up on things, you realize that you have another interest, or the one you have right now is kind of fading a little bit. I'm still changing even now after I transferred schools and now I'm in grad school. And I'll probably change again in the future. But accepting that you can change, you will change, and that you should change makes learning and growing a lot easier. And it makes the process of going from one thing to another a lot less painful. The third thing I would say is to think about things that have fascinated you since you were a child. For me, writing, history, politics, anthropology, astronomy, those things have always had a grip on me since I was a little kid. I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be a president. I wanted to be an author. At one point, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I always wanted to tell stories, meet people, and make decisions, and make a difference. Now, I am currently in grad school for international affairs. I'd like to get my PhD after this, but we'll see. I might change my mind again. But at this point, getting a PhD is something that excites me, that I'm really looking forward to. Um, and that's because I'm being honest with myself. I like research. I like diving deep into topics like authoritarian politics, the history of Russia, the politics of Russia. I think all that is really interesting. So now I want to be an expert in those things, and that's what my going to a PhD is for. I think once you open up yourself to the possibility that you are full of possibilities, it becomes easier to accept change, to accept growth, and ultimately find the thing that makes you happier than anything else. And honestly, like, we're not just one thing. I'm not just one thing. That's what had me trapped before. I thought I was just this one thing, this awkward black girl who had to make stories for other awkward black girls. But I'm not that anymore. Me acknowledging that has led me to where I am now. And honestly, I'm a lot more satisfied with my school and career life now than I was before at UNCSA. The last piece of advice I would give, this is where networking comes in handy, is to talk to people about your passion. Reach out to people who are doing what you want to do or what you think you want to do right now. I've held like 5 million international interviews with so many people who love their jobs and are willing to talk about them to me. And this is very important because you shouldn't just listen to them while they're talking, you should listen to yourself. If you can feel yourself getting excited about the day to day details, even if they're super boring, if all that stuff sounds exciting to you, no matter what they're saying, you're probably in the right place. Or on the other hand, if you hear someone talk about their job and you're like, wow, that sounds like hell, that's probably like a good sign that you're dodging a bullet. When you're working with others, I would recommend asking what brought them to where they are now. And it won't always be the same answer, but sometimes you'll find it'll fall in the same category. So someone in film might be like, oh, I just always wanted to tell stories, or I saw this movie when I was 5 and I was like, this is it, this is what I want to do. And you'll find that the answers of the most passionate people are often the simplest. They're like, I just love doing it. That's it. Like, I can't really explain it. It's just what I love to do. For me, it's just, I just really love learning about the world and the people in it. Um, and I could elaborate, but hopefully, what I accomplish in the next few years will speak for itself. So that's the end of the video. Feel free to ignore everything I just said because maybe you're like, maybe in 3 years you'll probably come back and say, this is why I dropped out of grad school or something. But I do not plan on dropping out of grad school because money. And also, I really do feel like I'm on the right track now. So take what you want from this video. I hope it helped anyone who is in film school and needs encouragement to keep going, or even is not in film school and like just needs reassurance that what they are doing is right. Or maybe you are thinking about changing your mind about what you're doing right now and you want to hear from somebody who did change her mind and is in a much better place now. So whoever you are, I hope it helped. And that's the end of the video.